Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of UNCTAD, Rebecca Greenspan, heads of state, ministers, distinguished participants. On behalf of the government and people of Barbados, I congratulate UNCTAD for providing 60 years of service and support to developing countries and for its contribution to the global dialogue on trade, growth, and development. I would like to register Barbados' appreciation to you, Secretary General, and to the Secretary General of UNCTAD for leadership and for hosting this Global Leaders Forum. I'd also like to place on record my sincere gratitude to you, Rebecca, for your steadfast support to small island developing states during your tenure, and commend you for hosting the first Global Supply Chain Forum in Barbados last month, and indeed the launch of your first ever SID strategy in UNCTAD. My friends, the world has changed drastically since the creation of UNCTAD in 1964. The global population has increased from 3.2 billion then to 8.1 billion this year. Countries like mine, which were on the cusp of independence then, are now on the front lines of the climate crisis. And with the growing inequalities between and within countries, we risk leaving many sections of our society behind. We are shockingly behind the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing are threatening our peace, the accessibility of supply chains, and indeed leaving many of the most vulnerable open to food and water insecurity. We are also one of the most indebted generations. Many small states are repaying more in interest repayments than in fact they are investing in education or health care. We are, my friends, at an inflection point. As we reflect on the role of UNCTAD for the next 60 years, attention must be paid to the multilateral trading system, as well as the transformation of the global financial architecture and the manner in which development is financed. This Global Leaders Forum is therefore an opportunity to reflect on the lessons learned throughout the past 60 years and to forge a new development course in this rapidly changing world. This demands a roadmap that points to new strategies for development that address sustainable development challenges while placing trade, the climate crisis adaptation, economic diversification, and indeed people-centered growth at the center of all that we do. Barbados, my own country, as with all small island developing states, has been dealt a difficult hand when it comes to dealing with our inherent vulnerabilities. For some, we have no control over such as our geography. But there are other issues confronting us that we can and that we must address. One such issue is access to appropriate financing. The financing gaps for sustainable development are growing exponentially. Estimates have illustrated that at least an additional $3 trillion of investment, US dollars, is needed annually for developing countries. However, many developing countries lack access to affordable and adequate financing. Many lack the fiscal space. We therefore sometimes get the impression that small states are chided for our development aspirations. Many of our countries which have been graduated from grant or concessional funding are still small developing states for vulnerable middle-income economies that face structural constraints which make diversification challenging. The reality is that our economies are fragile, and a catastrophic event such as a hurricane or earthquake or prolonged drought can decimate our entire economy, either in minutes in the case of the hurricane or the floods, or months in the case of a prolonged drought. Access to predictable development and climate finance grant funding to build resilience and to rebuild after disaster is therefore critical. I therefore urge the continued capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund, which has really not even met $1 billion in capital yet. But as we do so, let us also not forget the importance of adaptation funding, because we do not want only to be able to pay and recover from the loss and damage that we had, but we want to avoid and avert loss and damage. Just over a week ago, we launched consultations on the Bridgetown Initiative 3.0 as we met in Antigua, the Small Island Developing States Forum, the fourth one. This is a call for decisive action to transform the rules around representation at the international financial institutions and to scale up significantly the funding that is available to each of us, while at the same time shock-proofing our economies to be able to withstand these multiple crises that we are facing. Bridgetown 3.0 calls for the following changes to truly give the world a fighting chance. We urge credit rating agencies to play their part and to overhaul their methodologies along with others in the financial system to end the current systemic rating biases against small, poor, vulnerable countries and even middle-income countries that are vulnerable, and specifically to capture longer-term financial health as part and parcel of their picture. We call for all governments to establish a carbon price taking into account the Paris Principles and their level of development. That governments should further support the development of a global carbon pricing framework that is just and equitable, and task the international financial institutions to help us deliver on this. We ask that the IMF and its shareholders to achieve agreement on a new issuance of SDRs of at least $500 billion. And we ask them to remove surcharges as part and parcel of their mechanism, especially given the high interest rates that countries are paying now. Similarly, we ask that philanthropic organizations meet and agree to a global compact through which a defined portion of their financing would go to the financing of global public goods, along with other global solidarity levies that are designed specifically to meet the challenges that we have with respect to the global commons. I must expound that financing, however, is not the final destination for our global fight against climate crisis. Finance is not the only means by which we achieve resilience. Indeed, it is just the first step before we move to the other issues, from feasibility studies to procurement to project preparation. All of these things are critical before successful execution of the project, which is ultimately the destination to be able to build our resilience. Our goal always must be to shock-proof our economies in response to this climate crisis. So my friends, as UNCTAD celebrates this 60th year, we look forward and recognize that a safe and sustainable future requires you to further enhance your advocacy role, facilitate new innovative approaches to address sustainable development challenges, maximize trade opportunities, and help countries build the capacity to participate effectively in the global economy. The Global Supplies Chain Forum that you just held in Barbados was a step in that direction. If you can do these things, my friends, then you shall give the world and its vulnerable economies, low-income and middle-income vulnerable economies, a platform on which to build and develop the much-needed resilience that we need to last out in this century. In closing, I'd like to wish the management and staff of UNCTAD all the very best. And indeed, I truly am sorry that I could not be there today because of a previous commitment. But you know, my heart and my prayers are with you all, and I look forward to being able to work with you as we hand over to those who shall prepare for UNCTAD 16. Thank you very much.